So welcome to the video 8 of our LCA series, or the life cycle assessment, on how to construct a high quality life cycle assessment, the products that you've got. The video that we're talking about today is construction transport, which is part of construction, which is all part of the A series, which is all the sort of manufacturing and construction, installation, etc. of products. So we've split A5 into 3, which is all the energy and emissions associated with the installation of your product. Then there's the waste. That's the second component that was covered in the previous video. And this module is all about the transport, what transportation is required or associated with the construction phase of your product's life cycle. Okay. So I'm joined here today with, by Rebecca Eccles and Louisa Hodge. They head up our sort of LCA division here at Anistic. Becca's on camera. Louisa is here. Promise, she's just off the camera, just over here. So, why do you say hello just to prove you exist?
Hello.
There we go. That was where you just done with AI. Just there. So, without further ado, Becca, A5 construction transport. What is it?
So A5 construction transport is all about the transportation to or from the construction site. So this may be transport of your waste going to the waste carrier, or it may be the transport of your construction materials coming to the construction site.
Okay, good. And it's designed to cover all of that transportation phase, isn't it? So, for example, if you need a very large sort of haulage special plant to carry it around, as opposed to popping it in a wheelbarrow, it's that kind of stuff. And it was trivially helpful there, but like that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, fine. In terms of the data that we require for this module, what sort of data are we going to require for it?
So we need to know the distance to the waste processing centre. So you may need to make an assumption there. We'd also need to know the distance from the supplier for the construction materials like going to your construction site. So again, if you don't know that information, an assumption may need to be made.
Yep. So, again, for example, if you have specialist waste, so say, for example, in heaven forbid, asbestos, so say, for example, you're not allowed to use asbestos and you're a suspect, right? I don't know, but let's pick a better example. Say there's a radioactive component or whatever you're installing, something to do with, smoke alarms or something like that, and it needs specialist waste disposal, and you have to transport that waste to a far distant place in the country for specialist disposal. We're talking about that.
Yeah, that component. So for the most part, you'll just be going to a normal waste centre, which would probably be within like 40 kilometres, probably no further than that. If it's something like that, maybe it would be worth Googling where those centres are in the UK and then find the average distance it may have to go.
So if we're talking about, again, in construction sector, skips, is where that skip has to get to for its recycle use or disposal landfill. That kind of, yeah. Okay, fine. Fair. Accuracy and completeness of the data, and what data period should the data cover?
So we'll be looking at 12 months worth of data. However, the platform will calculate all of the weights for you, so don't worry about that. All we'll need to know really for you to input is the mode of transport and the distance.
Right, okay. In terms of assumptions required, again, there will be assumptions on where it's going. For example, typically where, I think you said it earlier, but typically how far away the landfill is, or typically how far the recycling plant is and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there'll be assumptions on that. So in terms of when you're producing an EPD, they usually say be very conservative and assume something like 50 kilometres. So it's probably going less than that, but unless you know any different, just be conservative.
All right, okay. And best practice here would be to I suspect is making an effort to understand what the data is by working with your clients to record it in the first place. Otherwise, you're just going to be guessing, aren't you? It's like, here it is, I've delivered it over to you, I then walk away. This requires you to do a little bit more and say, well, what happens with the waste component afterwards? Okay, well, let's have a look at it in use. Becca, let's have a look at the module itself, if we can, please.
Yeah, so bridge goes to its advanced menu. And we'll go back to our oak table example that we've already been covering in the previous videos. So if I click into this A5 construction, I click a new transport.
Oh, sorry.
And then if I click into a new transport route. So here, we can again label this, and we'll have a drop down for all the things we need to include transport for. So we've got bolts, so that's the bolts to the construction site, and then we've got the waste of the bolts, so that'll be to the waste centre. Electricity we don't need to worry about because there'll be no transport of the waste there. Pallets and straight back brakes will also need to include that. So we select bolts to the construction site.
These were all the things that we really looked at in the first of the A5 modules, like the additional components that you needed to install your product.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so as you can see here, I've just named it and I put bolts to construction site. So these labels will be really helpful just to make sure you don't get confused later on in the process. So here we just want to select our transport route. So we've got two options here, primary or secondary. So if there's only one transport route or one mode of transport, you only need to select one. If it's going by cargo ship or plane or train, etc., you may want to select it. So for this one, we'll just go with, it's going to come in a small lorry. So if I go down to the lorry section and I just select 3.5 to 7.5 metric ton.
Let me translate that. If you're American, that's truck. Okay? Truck. Lorry, truck.
Mm-hmm. And I'll select Europe because the UK is within Europe, so just to narrow down that data point.
Well, that's the best available data point, isn't it? I mean, I know we're not in Europe, but that's more relevant than the other ones there. So it's the most relevant data point, which is, okay, fine, understood, yeah.
And then if I select the distance, this is coming from the supplier to the construction site, so maybe it's traveling 70 kilometers. And then, then we just press submit. Or you can add a second transport mode if needed. And we just go through and we do the same again for all of them.
Should we do bolts waste?
Yeah. So if we add bolts waste here, and here I'll label it, say, bolts waste to waste centre. So yeah, again, we'll just select a typical sized bin wagon, I assume. So maybe that would be 16 to 32 metric ton.
Yeah, it's a lot for a bolt, but I'll take your point. For our purposes, as an example, we use...
Well, if it's a skip that's on the installation site and it's been dumped into a skip, maybe the skip's been carried away and that's other type of transport that's going. But yeah, then again, select the country. So we'll put Europe here. And distance, we'll just assume 50 kilometers to the waste centre.
And you'd recommend using, if you don't really know, just put 50 in.
Yeah, just put a conservative figure. If you know any better in the future LCAs you do, then that figure will likely decrease.
Okay.
And then again, just submit. So it's super, super easy. And then as you keep adding them, they'll appear on this list here.
Okay. Seems quite straightforward. And then back to LCA, and we can see that component filled in on the LCA table down here. Fantastic. Again, quite straightforward. So, I mean, and, in our example with oak tables, there's not a lot of materials to consider. If you do have a lot of things associated with your construction phase, there might be a few more things in there. But normally this, all of these 3A5 components are really quite straightforward. So then, they're not normally a problem. In terms of any gotchas, anything that I think we've mentioned the 50 kilometer sort of go-to bigger. Anything else you could think in terms of gotchas, things that are going to go wrong in this area or the data of this area?
I think it's just making sure you include both the upstream and downstream. So obviously for the construction materials, you need to account for the upstream transport from the supplier and then the downstream transport of the waste of that same construction material. So there might be a bit of confusion there. So just making sure to label it very clearly so you can follow along.
Broadly speaking, going back to our example, the bolts to hold this thing on the floor, someone needs to ship the bolts to us.
Yeah.
We're going to use the majority of them. I think we're out of power on. So there you go. I mean, in summary, how would you how do you summarize this construction transportation component?
So it's just the construction, any transport that's happening in the construction stage. So this may be upstream transport of construction materials coming from your supplier, and then downstream transport of the construction and packaging materials going to the waste center.
All right, I get it. Okay, good. So that's the transport. The way I think about it, by the way, is someone needs to get the volts to you. You're going to use a few, and you're going to have a few that you're going to throw away. Someone has to take them away. That's the way I think about it. Okay. So thank you very much for that. As I say, that was the 8th video in the life cycle assessment series. I hope it was useful to you. If you have any questions in terms of constructing an LCA, or you want access to the Inistic software, or you have anything to do with EPDs or any other carbon accounting sort of question, really, please feel free to get in contact. Drop me a mail, send me a text, send me a WhatsApp, whatever it is these days. Feel free to get in contact, and I'll see you again next time. So it's goodbye from me.
Thank you very much.
And
thank you and goodbye.
there's the voice in the background, Louisa Hodge, just saying goodbye there. All right, thank you very much. See you next time.